And I guess we're probably live. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have no idea what we're going to talk about, but I thought it'd be a lot more fun than me just talking to the camera. We could I could share some stuff and then you can kind of we can dialogue about it.
All right. Sounds good.
But I was, over the past week or so, I've been kind of sharing with you some stuff about all the kind of postmodernism, post-structuralism, philosophical theory behind a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now in the world,
Yeah.
and it's nothing new. But I just wanted to put some things into context in terms of what we're doing and how we're looking at things, because what I've noticed is on the, if you want to call it left and right, we'll just use those terms because it's easy. On the left side, you have people, you have cancel culture, you have LGBT, etc. rights, you have the transgenderism thing that's really popular, you have the racism thing that's, you have all of there's a lot of other issues too, but there's those are the prominent ones.
Yeah.
And then now we have the Black Lives Matter point, which I don't know if anyone's really talking about because I don't watch the mainstream news, so I only see the clips on YouTube, but it's seems to kind of be dying down, but they're still kind of talking about it in some ways, and we saw that interview with Terry Crews.
Yeah.
He was talking to Tucker, so it's still kind of in there, right? But the protest and all that stuff is not as prominent. Huh?
He's talking to Don, not to Tucker.
Yeah. Don, oh, yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, Don Lemon. And anyway, so you have all these issues over on the left, and what they're addressing is problems in our society. You know what I mean? When I look at everything, I'm not over here going, oh, the left is wrong, the right is correct. I'm seeing that, yes, there's problems, right? And the left is highlighting points that are issues in our society. And then on the right, though, you have, oh, this is just cultural Marxism. It's just trying to destroy America and destroy capitalism. And we can't let this invade, which is sort of the same kind of thinking as, the Cold War, where it's it's just left versus right. It's Russia versus the US. It's communism versus capitalism. It's the same kind of thing, but no one's really transcending either point, really, And I think that people who are more on the left and also really understand the whole point, because I think there's, many people who are on the left who are just there because they it's like when you grow up in a religious house, you just never question anything. You're just going along with it. Or if you grow up and your parents are Republicans, so you're Republican, or they're Democrats, so you're Democrat. You never really looked into any of it. And there's a lot of people like that. But I'm saying the people who are actually on the left, who are progressive, whatever you want to call it, who understand why they're on that side and what they're trying to get out of it and so forth, right?
Yeah.
I think that those people generally think that I'm assuming anyways, that they think that they're transcending all the problems. You know what I mean? Meaning they're not looking into the past. They're not trying to hold on to tradition. They're looking to move forward and create something new that is
for sure
benefit, right? So I don't think they're doing it from a nefarious purpose, which is the problem I see on the right, is that it's they're evil, which is, it's interesting because part of the critique because I've really been looking into this post-structuralism thing more. So back in college around 2005-ish, I was looking into Baudrillard and some of these things, for those who don't know what that is. If you watch The Matrix, the movie with Keanu Reeves, in the beginning of the movie, I think he's got a book where he has a USB key or something in it, I think. And it's a hollowed out book. Yeah. But the book itself is called, it's Simulacra and Simulation, or it's one of the books by Baudrillard.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic because the book itself is a simulation of a book, right? So there's a bit of irony there. But
I didn't even notice that. That's pretty cool.
Well, I don't know if that was, I'm sure that was intentional, but it just, yeah. Okay. So anyways, but the point is you have that book in there. So I started reading that in college, not really understanding it at kind of getting some idea, but I was so, at that point in my life, I really had not studied very much. outside of just what we were told in school, and then some things that were intrinsically interesting to me. Like, I always was fascinated by things that were outside of what we were taught, though. Like, I read 1984, even though we didn't read that in school. I was reading, when I was like in high school, I was reading Dostoevsky, but I didn't understand it. Like, I would read it more from the pleasure of, this is something beyond what I'm able to do, or almost like an intellectual person would read this. You know what I mean? But struggling to really understand the point of it, or, like getting something out of it. I'm not saying I didn't get anything, but it's like kind of, I remember when I was in middle school, I became really interested or fascinated by relativity theory and, like Einstein and all that. And I would read sort of the dumbed down, not Reader's Digest, but sort of the pop science versions of it, and some of it more detailed, and, but I actually got the book called Relativity by Einstein, right? And was reading and like looking at the mathematical equations and stuff, and kind of thinking it was really complex. When I look at it now, like, it's not really that complex, but that was my vocabulary level back then, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, my point is, I was looking into this stuff before. It was interesting because I always realized there was some kind of point within me where I knew that it was relevant to our world, but I just didn't know how. And I even remember back when I was in high school, studying, I took a philosophy course. We had like an elective. So I went to a Catholic school where we had to take like a religion course every year, but then as a senior, I could take an elective. So I took a philosophy course, and it was so good. Like, the teacher was really good at explaining everything. And so we would really kind of understand what this philosopher was about. And not really, like, we weren't doing philosophy. We were just learning about philosophy, and then we would have to, on test, explain, okay, what was this person's theory? How did it relate to this person? And like, it was kind of more like a chronological thing back from like ancient Greece. And I remember at that time feeling like something about the, like, Descartes and the idea between, there's like a gap between the mind and the body, and that question being somewhat problematic, like, meaning it had something to do with something in this world. Like, there was problems in this world based on this point. So it's just like an intuition I had. So now you fast forward to where we're at now, and it's like quite obvious, like the placing of the mind as superior to the body, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Is like a huge problem, because the mind would represent what we identify, like what we think about, what we feel, and all these things, and not really realizing what the mind is in its context within the world, and then actually thinking that there's a separation between the two.
Yeah.
Like, there's the spiritual world, there's all of that, and there's the physical world.
Yeah.
To the degree that it's pretty much accepted by most people, I think. Well, I don't want to say most people, because I'm sure there's people who don't accept this, or who think they don't accept it, even though they actually do, that think that the spiritual world is real and the physical world is not real.
Yeah.
And the reason I was giving that
Caveat.
sort of, is that it's like, even the people who are atheists, who are like, oh, there is no spiritual realm and all that, I don't believe it, I can't touch it, they still operating in a mental way, as if their mind and who they believe they are and their thoughts and all that stuff is of paramount importance.
Yeah.
They don't really see how it affects the world. It's kind of like everything in the world is happening the way it's happening, and then I have my mind and I'm pursuing my happiness and all that stuff, even though they may not use those words, but they would still ascribe to most of just reality as is given to them, right?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I was just thinking about how, if you grew up religious, like, that seems like that it's so different, like, to be atheist, that's so different, like, that's so wrong, like, clearly, that is the other end of that spectrum.
Right.
But the reality is, it's actually the same thing.
Right.
Because you're still abdicating the point of, like, being here and seeing, like, the physical body is what's here and everything. But it almost seems like, oh, I'm doing something different because it's not going along with the religion, and it's not just blindly following that, but you still aren't seeing the real solution.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was getting at with how the people on the left think that they're sort of transcending the problems. Like, so you have,
I can see
let's
that.
say you grew up super religious, and then you question all that, and you're like, that's just traditionalism. That's just, imposing ideas on people and trying to control people. Okay. But then you look at, you're still taking what's given to you and not really understanding how everything connects by becoming progressive. You see what I mean? And same thing with like the atheism thing. You're just taking the reaction to it actually as the transcendence of it. And so what I'm really seeing is like the left is a reaction to the right, you know, because the right is sort of the system as it's given to us, whereas the left is the fighting back against that.
Yeah.
You know, and you might say that the left and the right emerged at the same time, but I don't think so. I think that you had more like, you've always had sort of a capitalist sort of approach in our world, even though it wouldn't be called capitalism. There's always an approach of money over life, profit over life. And I mean, how do you know that? Because even back when Jesus was talking and doing all the thing he was doing, he was saying the same thing. Like, why did he go into the temple and flip over the tables?
Right. Yeah.
That's what he was talking about. Like, we're placing the value of money over life.
Yeah.
You know, and because if you think about it otherwise, like, what else was he saying? Like, he was just mad that a house of worship, they were like exchanging money there, like, and it was just like, that's disrespectful, and that's why he got mad about it. Like,
yeah,
that's not what
he made for that.
But that's kind of, I think, how people take it.
Yeah.
You know, but if that's the case, why is there such a close connection between modern Christianity today and the defense of capitalism?
How do you mean by close connection?
Well, it's like, who would be more likely to be a capitalist?
A Christian.
Christian or a leftist? You see what I mean? Obviously, leftist is not capitalist, but I mean, okay, an atheist, or it's not even a good example. Somebody who is like conservative, or traditional Christian versus somebody who's reacting to that. Which one would be more likely to be a capitalist?
Traditional Christian. And I'll say this, as far as in a lot of the socialist countries, they look at religion as like beneath them, or, you know, like something's like, no, we don't do that anymore.
Well, and I think the argument there, which it makes sense to me, I don't know if this is the argument, but it's like the state has become the God. So it's like, and which is interesting, because God is always the excuse that's used as to why we can't change the economic system. Do you see what I mean? But maybe in the more socialist type countries, the issue is, if you have like a preacher or somebody who is interpreting what God says, it's too much giving the power to say what is right or what you should do or should not do. It's not allowing the state to have that right. You see what I mean? Because like right now in the US, the government, like if you were to take a Christian versus the government, the Christian would probably say, you know, God tells me what to do. And people say this argument, right? But they're not really questioning per se like the capitalist system. So it just happens to work here. Do you see what I mean?
It just happened to go hand in hand.
It's not really a coincidence. I'm just saying it works here.
God just likes capitalism, obviously.
But it's like the type of Christianity that we have doesn't fuck with it. It still allows for an authoritarian system.
Right.
Where the authority is not actually, it's interesting because people say like, oh, God is my real authority, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, and like I've seen people on Twitter saying like, I don't, you know, the ones who are reacting to the whole kneeling protest, they're like, I don't kneel for anyone but God. Yeah. I only kneel to God or whatever. And it's like, why would you even kneel to God? Well, it's like they're trying to say that that's the authority in their life, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not really. Because if you take two different Christians, they're not going to agree on what you're supposed to do according to God. In fact, I think the only thing that they would agree on is that you need to accept that Jesus is like your savior.
Yeah.
That would be, but that's not really an obligation. Actually, that's just a mental decision. You know what I mean? It's like just an acceptance or a belief of something.
Right.
It doesn't imply anything that you need to do as a responsibility.
Right.
But it leads to a whole lot of other symbolic things. So Okay, so what I was really wanting to kind of open up though also is like, this is relevant to it. And also we did that podcast. Do you know when that one's going to be up? The one about
Yeah.
God?
So we're just waiting on the approval from Apple, essentially, and then they'll all be.
But that's one of the ones that's also being uploaded. Oh, okay, I
Yeah,
didn't realize
yeah.
that.
So it's
It's
like
just uploaded.
yeah, we've got them uploading, and I'm gonna upload the rest of them today.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're doing like a whole podcast on this point, but so the point today wasn't really I wanted to talk about God per se, but also just kind of riffing or whatever.
Just throw it in there.
Yeah, but I was really looking into all this stuff, like going back to like the whole Baudrillard. The reason I brought that up is because that Baudrillard was it's like a postmodernist philosopher, right? And part of what he was talking about, although I'm not an expert on it, I've just read some things here and there, read some of his books and so forth, but it's not like I've become a scholar of Baudrillard. Okay, so there's nuances to it, I'm sure, but generally speaking, it has to do with looking at how things have a symbolic value that are beyond just their economic value. And I saw a really cool video that was kind of going into some of these points. And they said, like, for example, if you take like a diamond, for example, right? What is the intrinsic value of a diamond?
Man.
Or even gold for that matter.
Yeah.
Like
we assign a value to it. It's like really high.
Okay, let me ask you this. Would you rather, well, it's not really a valid question, but like, for example, they made the point where they're saying that there's diamonds, for example, that are like, maybe this big or whatever the size is, that are worth more than some houses, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very practical.
So which would you rather have if you needed to be able to trade it for something in terms of economic value?
A diamond for sure.
So the diamond has a higher like trading value.
Yeah.
In the sense of its size and so forth. And that's only possible when you have an economy that's based on not the productive value of something or the usefulness of it rather, but on the value of it being able to be traded for money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the usefulness of the diamond that makes it so expensive or makes it so valuable rather. It's the fact that you can trade it for money. So it's like if I had a handful of diamonds, people would be like, oh, damn, they would get excited about that because they're thinking I can use that for money and so forth. See what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not the intrinsic value of it.
Yeah.
In terms of usefulness, the utilitarian value. So that was sort of an evolution of the theory of like economic value and so forth, right? It's like how our system works. But then Baudrillard was going one step further. And he was like, but we also have another level of value. So we had like the usefulness value of things, but then we had sort of like the commodity market value, which is what allows for like options trading and all kinds of shit, because it's not about the actual usefulness. Like you're just trading it for the money value of it, right?
Right.
But then he said another step further was the value of things based on the sense of identity that you get from it. So like there's another layer of value. Do you see what I mean? So for example, why would you have a diamond that you never had any intention of selling?
Just because you like what it represents on your hand.
You see what I mean? It's like, why do other people value it?
Yeah.
Because it could be traded. It's worth a lot of money, even though it has no usefulness in that sense.
Right.
So its economic value is not based on its usefulness. It's based on perceived something. But then the reason why somebody would own a diamond to wear it and so forth is like they're creating like an identity for themselves as being wealthy or whatever all the different things are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there was a cool point made in the video where it's like this back in the 50s and 60s, they started, looking at things from the perspective of like a washer and dryer.
Yeah.
And how they would both have the same design and the same look to them.
Yeah.
So it's like in your house, you'd want the washer and dryer that look the same. And then also the fridge that matches and all this other stuff. And it's going into just this, like this sort of, it's like an image that you're creating for yourself, right?
Yeah,
which is not in itself real in any way. It's just an image, right? So that's sort of the where the philosophy is going, is talking about this aspect of reality that prior to that no one had really talked about, right? So it kind of leads into the whole point of how we identify with an image of ourselves rather than like what we really are and so forth. And that's only possible with the mind.
That's an interesting point, because just yesterday David sent me a text and it was just like, how much would I have to pay you to cut your hair, to shave off all your hair? And I was like, what? And then he sent me this audio that was basically like, you ask someone about their hair, and people like tend to care a lot about their hair and the way they look and everything, right? But if you ask him like, okay, how much would you take if I wanted you to shave all your hair off? How much would it cost for me to pay you, or whatever? How much would I have to give you? And people will come up with a number, because it's like, oh, at first it's like, no, I'm not going to shave off my hair because I like it. I love it.
So like without asking about paying them or anything.
Right. Okay. And then when you come up with like, okay, well, I'll give you money for it. Like, oh, I'll take 1,000, like if you're paying money, I don't need this. Right? Yeah. But it is really interesting how we do identify with just these things are really, they're not that valuable in real life, but we create this value because they become a part of our identity. And then I don't know if this is where you're going to go with this conversation, but I can see, okay, because there's so many things that we keep as part of our identity, we don't actually make changes to the system that would actually have real value for us. But it's like we can't sort through all the parts that we've already deemed as, this is me, this is my identity, this is how I operate, this is how the system operates, and this is okay, I'm comfortable within this. It's like, because when you start just saying, well, let's get rid of these things, people are like, no, that's me. If you don't really clearly lay out for them, like, okay, well, there's actually real value within removing these things.
Right. And that's kind of what I was looking at within this point. So that's exactly the point.
Cool.
Is how when we place value on stuff that's not real. Now, what's interesting is we still feel that things that are real are valuable when they cause us discomfort. You know what I mean? It's not like we're totally detached from reality, but our relationship to reality is just pain. You know what I mean? Like if we're not experiencing pain, then we don't really care if it's real or not. Yeah. But as soon as pain comes in, then we're like, well, okay, fuck, we have to address what's real, because that's what's causing the pain, right? But then, of course, you have emotional pain and so forth as well, but that's still coming from your physical body, whether you realize it or not. But I wanted to read you this. So I was looking at this book that I have, okay?
Okay.
It's called Justice, Gender, and Family. And I think it's a book that I don't think I bought this book. I might have bought it. I don't think so. I think I got it from Katie's mom. But it's clearly been read and used and highlighted and stuff. But I was looking at it because I've been looking into all this structuralism, post-structuralism, all this stuff, and I'll show you some more stuff later as we're talking. But I was like, what are some of the books that I have that could give me some more insight into, this whole approach, right? So I was looking at this book, and I noticed right away the word justice pops out, right? So I'm like, what is this justice thing? Like, why are people talking about justice so much? You know what I mean? Because you hear this a lot, like, we need justice, right?
Yeah.
And here's the preface. Is it the preface? Let me see. No, I think it's the introduction. Check this out. It's called Justice and Gender. We as a society pride ourselves on our democratic values. We don't believe people should be constrained by innate differences from being able to achieve desired positions of influence or to improve their well-being. Equality of opportunity is our professed aim. Okay. The preamble to our Constitution stresses the importance of justice, as well as the general welfare and the blessings of liberty. The Pledge of Allegiance asserts that our republic preserves liberty and justice for all. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you got us there. Like that, we are all professing that we are valuing, because I'm like, where is this word coming from? Like, oh yeah, it's in like everything, the word
Yeah.
justice. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it says yet substantial inequalities between the sexes still exist in our society. In economic terms, full-time working women earn on average 71% of the earnings of full-time working men. One half of poor and 3/5 of chronically poor households with dependent children are maintained by a single female parent. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I
When
almost
was
like
this book
texted you a
written?
screenshot. Huh?
When was this book written?
It looked, it's like late 80s. I mean,
Okay.
where's the actual copyright date?
Okay. That's
1989.
interesting.
1989. Um, and then this part was interesting too. It says, because they talked about like, underrepresentation in like the Senate and the Supreme Court, things like that. Underlying and intertwined with all these inequalities is the unequal distribution of the unpaid labor of the family. An equal sharing between the sexes of family responsibilities, especially childcare, is the quote great revolution that has not happened. Um,
Man, I have so much to say on that already.
I'm just looking to see if I can read it, or if I should read it, or just there's a specific point I wanted to share. I'm just going to read real quick. Okay, this is not that much.
Okay.
Women, including mothers of young children, are, of course, working outside the household far more than their mothers did. And the small proportion of women who reach high-level positions in politics, business, and the professions command a vastly disproportionate amount of space in the media compared with the millions of women who work at low-paying, dead-end jobs, the millions who do part-time work with its lack of benefits, and the millions of others who stay home performing for no pay what is frequently not even acknowledged as work. Certainly, the fact that women are doing more paid work does not imply that they are more equal. It is often said that we are living in a post-feminist era. This claim, due in part to the distorted emphasis on women who have made it, is false, no matter which of its meanings is intended. It is certainly not true that feminism has been vanquished, and equally untrue that it is no longer needed because its aims have been fulfilled. Until there is justice within the family, women will not be able to gain equality in politics, at work, or in any other sphere.
Whoa.
So now, okay, part of the reason why I was like, hey, you want to get on like a hangout and talk about it is because when I read that, I'm like, okay, remember we were talking about Black Lives Matter?
Yeah.
And like they want to decenter the nuclear family or whatever it is, right? You
Yeah.
see?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, this is 89.
Yeah.
As I argue in detail in Chapter 7, the typical current practices of family life, structured to a large extent by gender, are not just. Both the expectation and the experience of the division of labor by sex make women vulnerable. As I shall show, a cycle of power relations and decisions pervades both family and workplace, each reinforcing the inequalities between the sexes that already exist within the other. Not only women, but children of both sexes too are often made vulnerable by gender-structured marriage. 1/4 of children in the United States now live in families with only one parent, in almost 90% of cases, the mother. Contrary to common perceptions, in which the situation of never married mothers looms largest, 65% of single parent families are a result of marital separation or divorce. Recent research in a number of states has shown that, in the average case, the standard of living of divorced women and the children who live with them plummets after divorce, whereas the economic situation of divorced men tends to be better than when they were married. Which
Somebody's not paying child support.
Well, it didn't also say specifically if the men have the kids.
Yeah.
Um,
What is a gender structured family? Like what do they mean by that?
Let me read a little bit more, yeah, because there's some other points here. A central source of injustice for women these days is that the law, almost noticeably in the event of divorce, treats more or less as equals those whose custom, workplace discrimination, and the still conventional division of labor within the family have made very unequal. Central to this socially created inequality are two commonly made but inconsistent presumptions: that women are primarily responsible for the rearing of children, and that serious and committed members of the workforce, regardless of class, do not have primary responsibility or even shared responsibility for rearing the children. The old assumption of the workplace, still implicit, is that workers have wives at home. So this is, I think, part of the gendered family thing. It is built not only into the structure and expectations of the workplace, but into other crucial social institutions such as schools, which make no attempt to take account in their scheduled hours or vacations of the fact that parents are likely to hold jobs. Now, of course, many wage workers do not have wives at home. Often they are wives and mothers, or single, separated, or divorced mothers of small children, but neither the family nor the workplace has taken much of account of this fact.
So wait, the schools should plan their vacations based on the parents' work schedules? Is that what they're saying?
Okay, well, let me finish this part too, because you asked about the gender structured point.
Yeah.
But neither the family nor the workplace has taken that. Okay. Employed wives still do by far the greatest proportion of unpaid family work, such as childcare and housework. Women are far more likely to take time out of the workplace or to work part-time because of family responsibilities than of their husbands or male partners. And they are much more likely to move because of the husband's employment needs or opportunities than their own. All these tendencies, which are due to a number of factors, including the sex segregation and discrimination of the workplace itself, tends to be cyclical in their effects. Wives advance more slowly than their husbands at work and thus gain less seniority, and the discrepancy between their wages increases over time. Then, because both the power structure of the family and what is regarded as consensual, rational family decision-making reflect the fact that the husband usually earns more, it'll become even less likely as time goes on that the unpaid work of the family will be shared between the spouses. Thus, the cycle of inequality is perpetuated. Often hidden from view within a marriage, it is in the increasingly likely event of marital breakdown that the socially constructed inequality of married women is at its most visible. I know, it's like there's so much where you can just like, this is what I mean when I say the gender structured marriage makes women vulnerable. We live in a society that has over the years regarded the innate characteristic of sex as one of the clearest legitimizers of different rights and restrictions, both formal and informal. So, okay. The reason I was looking at that point and in terms of the significance of it is it's making what I would say is a valid point. Like when a mother has children and like the father's not there, they're going to be at a disadvantage because now they have to go to work and so forth, right?
Yeah.
They're saying that the disadvantage wouldn't be the same for the father who has kids and doesn't have a mother in the family because the father already is going to earn more because that's the way the workplaces are set up, and it's because, you know, the companies prefer the men or whatever the case is, right? But what I find interesting about it, because you can kind of just see the overall tone and everything of it, is like the solutions that are discussed, or the way it's being discussed, is it never gets to a point of we should have a society where everybody has everything they need, and we should build that. It's more like we need to redefine and rethink what we think of as a woman versus a man and so forth.
Yeah.
We shouldn't say that men have certain roles and women have certain roles. We should redefine all of that. And here, let me show you some examples of where this is coming, because I'm not just making this up. Like, this is what they're thinking. Okay. Right? Let me show you what I mean. Hold on.
But, you know, to some people that does sound like a good argument.
Well, but here's where it comes from. Okay, so let me pull this down a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so for anybody who's been watching this, they might be like, why were you talking about this stuff in the beginning about Baudrillard and all this stuff? But so I was kind of just randomly talking about with you, but this is where it's all coming from. Post-structuralism okay, is a late 20th century movement in philosophy and literary criticism, which is difficult to summarize, but which generally defines itself in opposition to the popular structuralism. Okay, so we're talking 50s, 60s France. It's related to postmodernism, although they're not exactly synonymous. In the post-structuralist approach to textual analysis. So textual analysis just means like when you're reading something and you're trying to understand the meaning of it. The reader places the author as the primary subject of inquiry. Replaces, I don't know if I said places or not, replaces the author as the primary subject of inquiry. So in other words, when you're trying to understand the meaning of a text, to a post-structuralist, the most important thing to consider is not the author themselves, but the person who's reading it. Because structuralism was like this movement prior to post-structuralism. I mean, they pretty much happened at the same time, basically. It's like as soon as they started talking in terms of structuralism, people were already criticizing it, being like, we need to go beyond that. The idea was, we can't just look at a book or anything or read something or look at something and say, this is what it means, because you can't, it's like, you can't just look at the dictionary definition of a word and say, okay, well, this is what it means. They're saying because you have to look at the history of the word and the context of the word.
Okay.
Right? Meaning, how was it used before? Like, what's the development of it? Right? It's not just about the definition itself. And the author themselves will be in a certain cultural context that'll influence what they mean and so forth.
Okay.
Right? And even the ideas of when they talk about things in terms of male and female, there will be a certain hierarchy that's implied there, and that'll influence what it means. So this is what structuralism is about. It's like the structures of society influence the meaning of it, not just what the author is thinking they're saying, but it's like the structures are influencing what the author is actually even saying, because he's within the structure of the society. But post-structuralism was like, we need to even go beyond that, because a reader's cultural and let me go back. Structuralists examine other sources for meaning, which are, post-structuralists rather, which are therefore never authoritative and promise no consistency. A reader's culture and society then share at least an equal part in the interpretation of a piece to the cultural and social circumstances of the author. So the reader's culture and society is going to influence how they're interpreting it. And what they're basically saying is that it doesn't even matter what the author is saying. Yeah. It's totally irrelevant, because the author can't even say what he wants to say, because he's a product of all these structures and implicit biased stuff. And then the reader is also coming at it with their interpretation of it. And that's actually the most important point. So it's like placing the important, go ahead.
It doesn't matter what you've said to me. I was offended. You know,
right.
You could say the sky is blue.
You see how it applies to everything today?
That is so offensive that you would say the sky is blue. You should apologize to me.
Right. But it's like, well, but I'm saying that because and it's like, it doesn't matter. The way I'm interpreting.
Okay, I see it.
So this is actually pretty cool. It says some of the key assumptions underlying post-structuralism include. Okay, so this is where you start to get the more bigger picture of it. The concept of self as a singular and coherent entity is a fictional construct. You remember that time we were chatting the other like last week or whatever about, you have the bundle of neurons. That was, I think, like, I have to remember David Hume or someone like that. And then Hegel was looking at, okay, the self is, it's like when you have something that's kind of constantly reflecting on itself through time. Maybe was it Heidegger or Hegel? It was one of them, right? But anyways,
Hegel, yeah.
Okay, so then they got to the point of the self is that sort of synthesis, antithesis sort of process, right? Mm-hmm. But here, when we get to post-structuralism, they're saying the self itself is a fictional construct. And an individual rather comprises conflicting tensions and knowledge claims. The interpretation of meaning of a text is therefore dependent on a reader's own personal concept of self. And this is what it really is, I find interesting.
Yeah.
What does it mean, a reader's own personal concept of self?
How you see yourself.
But and so it's like...
It's very subjective.
Right. It's like totally subjective.
Yeah.
And whether you can argue it's created by other structures and so forth, and that's like, I don't know if you remember, I think you do remember, but everyone else wouldn't know, when we were looking at Judith Butler, right?
Yeah.
And we're looking at this giving account of oneself.
Yeah.
And Judith Butler was talking about an ethics based on the opacity of the subject to itself,
Right.
saying that basically, here it is, any concept of responsibility which demands the full transparency of the self to itself, an entirely accountable self, necessarily does violence to the opacity which marks the constitution of the self it addresses. In other words, like, you just have to simply accept that you can't know yourself.
But hang on, because there's like, the way that it's written does violence to the opacity which marks the constitution of the self it addresses. Could this also be interpreted as, what she's saying is, when you're observing yourself, if you have to take full account of everything that you are, it will actually change who you are? Could she be saying it that way? Because that would actually make sense.
Yeah, I think that is what she's saying. But what's the significance of that?
Well, okay, so then you're no longer the same person. Like, if you're actually taking into account, taking in responsibility, you're actually looking at everything that you're doing, everything that you are, then, oh, you're going to realize there are some things here that you've created yourself that need to change, and that will essentially obliterate who you were if you actually take the responsibility for it. But if you don't, because it seems like, I think later on she makes the argument that you shouldn't do that, because then it does change you.
Well, it says the scene of address by which responsibility is enabled is always already a relation between subjects who are variably opaque to themselves and to each other. The ethics that Butler envisions is therefore one in which the responsible self knows the limits of its knowing, recognizes the limits of its capacity to give an account of itself to others, and respects those limits as symptomatically human.
Okay.
It takes seriously, yeah.
So she's saying, don't take responsibility.
Right.
Just accept, okay, where you are, and don't really fully look at everything, and just be okay with being whatever it is that you are, and accept that other people are going to be what they are, and don't actually change anything. So it's weird to see it from that light of, okay, if you do take full responsibility, you will change.
Yeah.
But don't do that.
Well, it's when you, I mean, obviously we're not going into the person's entire argument, but the way I'm reading it, it's like it doesn't say that it's even possible. It's just saying that it would do violence to it.
Yeah.
Does that mean it would actually be possible? Or is it like you're just hurting yourself by trying to do it?
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Meaning it's it's like who I am is a certain way. I don't know why. And if I try to question that, it's just going to hurt me. So what's the point? I should just realize there's a certain limit. Like, who I am is who I am. It's who I am. I don't know why I am who I am or why I am who I am.
Yeah.
I just need to accept a certain level of, it's just who I am.
But that's so limiting.
But it says that, like, ethics that requires responsibility has to start with the point that we have to limit our responsibility, that the responsibility has to already be a subject in relation to its opacity. But it makes sense based on this other point we were looking at. Let me go back here.
Okay.
I was just shopping the screen share because it's like, so we don't have to stare at the screen. Look, it's entirely fictional construct. So if you're the subject, that's like you're the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to understand yourself, that's like trying to read a book that you didn't write. Because society created yourself, like the world created yourself. The structures of society created who you are.
Okay.
But you can't understand it from the perspective of what it actually means because of all the problems in structuralism. That's what it's pointing out. It's all biased and all this stuff. But also, that's not even what's important. What's important is how you are interpreting it. And you're also biased within all of that anyway. So it's like creating this situation where it's like literally totally impossible. Look what it says. An author's intended meaning is, where did it go? Secondary to the meaning that the reader perceives. And a literary text has no single purpose, meaning, or existence.
That's just ridiculous. It's almost like they're saying, it's kind of like that theory that like if God were to question his own existence, like then what would happen? Would he disappear? That's kind of like what they're saying here is like you're a fictional character, and so if you start to question your actual reality, you don't know what'll happen. Like it's gonna do violence to you. It's gonna cause harm to you. You might disappear. You don't do it. Just accept that you're this character, and go along with the story.
It is necessary to utilize a variety of perspectives to create a multifaceted interpretation of a text, even if these interpretations conflict with one another. Okay, so even if your interpretations of two events are in conflict, that's okay. That's how you understand things. Is that not doublethink?
That is doublethink. Okay, but
there is no, this is what it is, this is what it isn't. It's just simply, you can't know what anything is. There's a variety of ways of looking at it, and you don't even know how you operate. So literally all you can do is just like have a whole bunch of conflict. I mean, really think about it. If we were to like step above all of this, right? Or step back, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
This is the excuse for why you feel conflict within yourself without having to change it.
Yeah. I can see that.
So what is it? It's
but
like
I can also see the argument that's made for that as well, as far as like you have to hear other people, hear other perspectives, even if they go against your own perspective. That's kind of like the argument that if someone were to read that, they would say like, no, that makes sense. Like you can't just be one-sided. You can't just, everything won't agree with what you're saying. So you have to take different, it's like people will say.
But what they're saying though is that they're all valid. Notice, it's not saying in order to get to a conclusion of what something means, we need to consider all the perspectives, and then it's saying all the perspectives is the meaning.
Yeah, okay.
That's the meaning.
Yeah.
So there is no one set meaning. The problem with it though is like, that's not how we experience reality. Like we experience reality as either we have what we need or we don't.
Yes.
And so this doesn't really lead to a physical solution to problems. It leads to the solution of just keep changing how we talk about stuff and keep. Yeah. And so it's like, but what was interesting to me is that when you're in this, you can't see that it's not going to produce a solution, because you have to buy into the point that like who you are is totally not real anyways. You can't, you can't have an actual definitive conclusion about something. Like there is a best way to do something and this is the solution.
Yeah. So here's an example of you have what you need, but you don't. Which you can obviously get to the correct answer with this, but like kids in Haiti eating those dirt cookies.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we have what we need, like as in we're full, but you don't actually have what you need because there's no nutrition within that.
But then look at the sort of relativism that people will have of saying, well, but who are you to impose your Western capitalist consumerist views on those children and whether they're happy? Like, why are you trying to just like destroy their identity of who they are in their country with their culture, etc.? Why are you trying to, you see what I mean? You're imposing your point on that.
Yeah, but
I mean, that's kind of the general argument.
Yeah.
But the issue I see with all of it is, okay, so where does this end? Where does any of the application of this theory come to a conclusion?
Right.
where it's best for everybody.
Yeah.
And this is why I see truth within the point of people saying like for example, Black Lives Matter, a lot of these types of things are just trying to destroy everything. You see, because they're not, the philosophy upon which they're founded is inherently, you can't have an actual real, this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It's just like okay, here's somebody who's oppressed. Okay, let's find a way to adjust everything so they don't, so it's like, it's not even so that they're not oppressed. Because what would be the solution to women? Okay, notice how it said that women tend to, even if they have to go to work, they tend to take care of the children more, and the men tend to not.
Right.
Okay, so one argument for why that happens could be because they are, the men and the women, the structure of society is that men feel superior, women feel inferior. We've both accepted this relationship, and therefore women have to do the work that the men see as beneath them. And really, the men are just seeing the women as the slaves to do the work that the men don't want to do. And the women also have accepted this, and we've accepted it as a structure of society. So that's one, I mean, that would be the interpretation of this kind of line of thinking.
Yeah.
So it's the, okay, but then the question is, okay, what if the woman is actually better and better equipped, but also just better physiologically, everything, at taking care of the children? And like, what if it's not just because the man prefers it? What if it's actually best for the children?
Yeah.
And best for the woman, and best for the man, and therefore, and what if it's best for society?
Yeah.
Because if it's best for society, meaning that the children, by having the mother take care of them, and let's just say in the context of the way things are, the father working, although it would be beyond that, but let's just take that for a moment.
Yeah.
Then if it's the case that would be the best situation, that would produce a stable child, and then they would be able to participate more effectively in the society and not be confused and feel conflicted, and whatever the thing is, that would produce a better result for society. That would reflect back to the mother and father and as their experience of society in the world, and be more supportive for them.
Yeah.
So in other words, what I'm saying is, if we look at things in a best for all context, instead of all this other way of looking at it, it's like, what would be best for all would be to identify what is it actually that children need, and what's the best structure to have them do that, and then have everyone realize that, agree to it, and then benefit from it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting within this is, it seems to me so far, I mean, I think we already know the conclusion of this, because this is written in 1989. So we know what the arguments are founded upon these kind of theories. We already know what they are.
Yeah.
We need women to be paid exactly the same as men, and every company across the country should have equal men and women amount. So there should be an equal number of women CEOs and men CEOs, and also then we have to now factor in Black CEOs, Hispanic CEO. We have all of these things, not just men and women at this point. We have to factor all that in and create society according to that. Okay. So then in that context, when I look at society, let's say I'm like a Mexican man. Okay. When I look at society and I see reflected, there's this percentage of men who are Mexican in the world or in the society, and then when I look at all of the structures in terms of where Mexican men have a place in society, it reflects back to me in a way where I feel comfortable being a Mexican man.
Okay.
Meaning, like, I'm not oppressed by the fact that, hey, how come there's no Mexican men who are CEOs?
Right.
How come there's no Mexican men who are this or that or whatever? I'm just using that as an example. You could say a Black woman, you could say a white man, whatever you want to call it, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like the structures of society, when I read the story, the narrative of what's going on in reality, it makes me feel comfortable. I'm like, okay, who I am is not oppressed anymore.
Yeah.
But what is the actual structuring of society that would produce that? Could we actually even, according to like this kind of theory, how could we even come to that agreement? Because no matter what you do, isn't it hypothetically possible, well, I guess theoretically possible, that there's going to be somebody at some point who is a new expression of something that doesn't feel like they have a place, that doesn't feel like they're represented.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's like, think about this. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. There's a lot of reasons why it's important that we have had or would have a black president. Okay. But what was one major reason that was given?
Because then black people can see that like literally anything is possible within the
Right. In other words, they could see like, I could be president.
Right.
See, so it's like you're reading a book and you're like, how come there's no black characters? I feel left out.
Yeah.
So obviously that's a book. It doesn't have any physical impact on your life, although there's the psychological self-esteem aspect. But isn't that the same kind of argument as to why it was important that we have a black president?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but I've also heard the argument from the other side as far as like, you want that representation because then, you know, otherwise you can't identify with those characters or whatever. It's like, you know, if you're watching a movie, it's like you don't identify with the heroes, and so, you know, other people can pretend to be the heroes, but you can't because they're like, no, you know, if you're watching Disney movies, right, where you're like, young girl wants to be Elsa. Well, Elsa's not black. You can't be Elsa.
Yeah.
You know?
But Elsa's also a princess, right? I think.
Yeah.
They're not that either.
But
Now,
you can
like,
pretend.
That's not me defending Disney movies, because they're trash. Okay.
Yeah.
But not for the same reasons everyone else is maybe saying.
Right.
So but I hear what you're saying. It's like, you like, if the presidents are only white, then as a black person or someone else who's not white, I can't, or who's not a woman, or who's not a man rather, is I can't do that because there's no examples of it.
Right.
Or in other words, that person isn't this, so I can't do it.
Right.
But that would only be the case if you defining yourself according to your race, your gender, etc.
Yes, that.
So,
and also by what's already here.
Right, but what I'm saying is like, you're defining yourself according to the projected image of the form that you're in. It's like, where does it end? Like, what about a person who only has one leg?
Right.
Would they look at all the past presidents and also say, okay, regardless of their race, like, I'm a man, I'm white, I'm all these things, but I don't only have one leg, and there's no presidents that don't have one leg. So I don't feel like I can be president.
Yeah.
Or like where does it end logically in terms of what are the axioms that are like supporting all of this theory?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think another way to say that is like, you know, if you're of mixed race, it's like, oh, well, I'm half Hispanic and half Asian or whatever.
Does it come down to percentages?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I'm 68% Hispanic and, you know, whatever. And there's never been somebody like that. Yeah.
What's fascinating to me about it is like, so what's the solution here? If we just looked at the marriage, you know, single mother, that kind of thing. It's like, if we had a society where we made sure that people had what they needed, like, in other words, the children have food, the parent has enough food and so forth, clothing, shelter, etc., like the best of it, not just marginally enough, like the best. Why would a woman feel the need to go to work? Why would a man feel the need to go to work? Why would anybody feel the need that I have to go do it in order to put food on the table?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What's the intrinsic value of going to work?
Well, sometimes people do feel like they are building something.
Okay. So there's a usefulness value,
Yeah.
meaning like things are actually getting built.
Yeah.
But then there's the aspect of you can use your labor to get money.
Yes.
So I'm just
And
looking
then,
at it in the same context of like we talked about Baudrillard.
right.
So things have to get done. Okay.
Yeah.
But does that mean everybody has to have a job to get all those things done?
No.
In a world where we have increasing technology and all this stuff, like couldn't we possibly do it where very minimal labor is required to make everybody have what they need?
Yeah.
So, and then if you're literally just getting a job so you can get money, meaning it's not about what you're producing. Like, does a person go to work at Walmart because they're like, I need to help make sure people get that stuff at Walmart? Or are they like, I need fucking money for food and rent?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so in other words, it's sort of like with the diamond. It's not useful, but it can be traded for money. That's what gives
Right.
it sort of that extra value.
Right.
So
Right.
a woman who, like, let's just say, I know people will be offended if I just only talk about it as women, but it's like a person generally, if the only reason they're needing to be away from their children is because they need to make money,
Yeah.
then why not just have a society where they don't need to do that?
Yeah.
Then they can just be with their kids and there's no more problem.
Right.
But where the real problem, I think, has come in, which is like you start to see it, this theory, because this theory is based on, this book is the same kind of theory, critical theory that we were just looking at with post-structuralism. It's all led to all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is at the next level where, remember, the diamond now has value as I'm perceiving myself in a certain way by having the diamond and displaying it and so forth. So is people going to work just about making money?
No.
Or is it also like my value as a human being, as an equal in society? The fact that a man can go to work means that a woman should be able to go to work.
For sure.
But what's interesting is, as a man, the only reason you're going to work generally is to make money.
Right.
Most men are not going there because now, like, there's other aspects too, like they feel like they have to provide. So it's like the same argument that's made where women feel like, hey, the structure of the family is gendered and therefore puts women inferior to men and so forth, all of those points. It also works against the man as well, because they have these beliefs based on this structure in society. Like, as a man, I have to provide for my family and all these things.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So they feel that pressure. So it's not just like they're doing it because it helps them feel like a man, let's say.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that element of it too. But it's like, why are people getting their sense of identity as just the fact that they're able to have economic value?
Oh, because we value money more than life.
You see what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
None of this philosophy or anything will ever produce a solution, because none of it is considering, it's all taking the value of money and everything for granted still.
Yes.
So it will never transcend what's currently going on. It'll never provide a solution. It can't provide a solution.
Yeah.
Because everything was still in the context of money is more important than life. So even though it's all anti-capitalist, it still empowers the capitalist just at a whole nother level. And so I think it's like people might have a belief, like, as someone who's on the left, like, we need to get rid of the US because it's capitalist and all this stuff, right?
I was just going to ask you, what are your thoughts on like what they meant, Ilhan Omar, what she meant by,
You see, this is it.
Yeah.
All of this is like, we just need to dismantle all of these systems because they're oppressive. But who do you empower if you dismantle the US? China or Exxon or any company that now can't be held accountable by a sovereign nation.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't even consider how, like, all these companies that already exist. Okay, we're dismantling the system, the economic system of the US, but that's not actually
dismantling the
world.
Money system and
the
value of money.
Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't even see that greater picture. I was just looking at it like, okay, well, she's kind of saying, dismantle the economic system. There is a big change that needs to be made there. But she's saying just in the US, where that doesn't affect the entire world. Well, it does affect the entire world, but it doesn't make even or equal the entire world. And so then now we're at a disadvantage within that.
What is the clear solution that's being given?
That's being given right now.
You see how it's all just dismantle?
Yeah, everything is dismantle.
It's like the belief, I guess, that the structures that we have are artificial, and therefore if we just remove them, a new system will emerge. But like when I order something from Amazon,
yeah,
I'm not ordering it from the US government. I'm ordering it from Amazon.
Yeah.
So what structures are we dismantling that's going to change anything about Amazon? How it operates, how it treats its workers, any of that stuff.
Nothing.
And then if there's no governments, who determines who then is able to enforce any point about Amazon treating its workers properly or anything?
Also,
so we just need one government for the entire world that has that authority.
Yeah.
But then what happens when the people who are in charge of that don't consider what's best for everybody?
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. Is there a one best way to, and I'm talking like specific detail. Is there a one best food that every person on the planet should eat right now?
Oh, no.
Not necessarily, right? Because our bodies are set up differently. We might have different nutritional needs depending. Now, hypothetically, over time, we could support everyone to get to a point where our bodies are functioning optimally and like there's no more need for different, or something like that. But that's like some hypothetical in the future. That is hypothetically possible. But it's not reality right now. It's not where we're at right now, even if it is hypothetically possible.
Yeah.
You see? So how do we then what if the government says everybody needs this because it's for everybody? Because there's no difference between anybody. There's no difference between races. There's no difference between sexes. Nothing. There's no differences.
Yeah.
Because if we try to impose any structures that said there's any difference between anything, now we're hurting people.
So everybody gets the food pyramid. Everybody gets the food pyramid.
But then the ironic thing is everybody's looking to be unique.
Yeah.
But the solutions that are being proposed by pretty much everybody is like not looking at the uniqueness of things at all.
Yeah.
It's not even recognizing the actual commonalities. It's like everything has been like flipped on its head,
And so the clarity within that is obviously everyone wants to be unique but treated equally, right?
If everybody is unique, how do you have a television show produced by somebody else?
Yeah.
By a company that's just trying to make money, include your unique expression in it already when it's supposed to be unique and totally self-created?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Well, the argument for that wouldn't it be people can identify, like not everybody identifies with it, but a large group of people, sure, but not everybody. And so it's unique in that way where it's like only 10 million people watch this show.
Right, but 1,000 years from now, these large groups won't have meaning anymore. Because right now, like think about it. We're saying there's white and there's black and there's this and there's that and there's male and female. Okay? Okay. But are those categories the broad categories anymore?
No.
Like currently where we're at in terms of society, is male and female the broad categories that represent all of humanity anymore? No, it's way more there's way more variation than that now.
Yeah.
So over time, if it's left to the mind in its imagination, that variation is only going to increase. And the problem is the physical, it's like, where do people seem to have the most problem is within the way things are represented in a way. Do you see what I mean? I know there's people, obviously Black Lives Matter is talking about, people of color or black people, depending on how they're talking about it, are being killed by police. So that's a physical problem. Okay, that's not a mental problem. Although it actually is mental from the perspective that it's misrepresented, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you take it at face value that black people are being mass murdered by police, then that is a real physical problem. But that's not actually what's happening.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? But
yeah,
because it's now taken the form of this is reality, then that's what it is. But regardless of that, people are being killed by the police. There's no denying that.
Yeah.
Regardless of the underlying details of it, it's a fact. Well, that's a physical problem. But a movie where, did you hear this thing about Halle Berry?
Yeah, I did.
Right? Where it's like she was going to play a trans man, I think. And then people were upset because she can't represent it properly.
Yeah. And is a trans man a woman transitioning into a man? That's what I assume.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Right? Because they're saying that
she is a woman.
She was referring to it as her, etc.
Uh-huh.
They were saying, no, a trans man is a man. Like, they were upset because she clearly didn't get it.
Clearly.
So it's like, that's not a real problem.
Yeah.
But then there's so go back to kind of what I was saying in the very beginning. It's like, then there's the conservative side, which is like, movies are fine the way they are. Like, you have men, you have women. Who cares if it's transgender or this or that? Like, what does any of that matter? Just keep everything the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm not on the side of, no, we need to keep it the way it is. Like, if there is a movie, you need to have a man, you need to have women, and they need to have their separate roles and so forth. Like, I'm not even interested in that argument.
Okay.
Because what is the purpose of the movie?
The purpose of the movie is to convey a message or, get you to feel something.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Let's say, I want you to name one famous, like Brad Pitt level trans actor or actress or whatever you want to call it.
No fucking clue.
Okay, so who is going to play that? Who's going to replace Halle Berry?
No name.
Okay, somebody who's trans, ostensibly, right? And then they're going to play this role. Are they going to get paid the same as Halle Berry?
No, they're not.
But
they shouldn't be anyway.
Well, they shouldn't be. Why?
Because they haven't put in the work that Halle Berry draws in a bigger crowd. You're going to get more money from.
Are you actually arguing she's really worth more, or are you just saying according to the system?
I'm saying according to the system.
Okay.
Like, she has done more movies. She's more popular, more famous. You're going to get more money by using Halle Berry.
From a purely capitalist perspective, yes.
Yeah.
Meaning, from a purely capitalist perspective, if you were this movie studio, what is your purpose in making the movie?
To make money.
It's not about conveying a message. Now, those are secondary things. Like, maybe somebody wants to make a movie in order to explain something and all that stuff. Sure. But even if you have, how many movies are like that get made that become blockbusters?
Not so many. I mean,
the ones that really want to tell a story, that's like the art films. That's like the independent films, and like very few of those actually make any real money, like like millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. Like a Star Wars movie is not trying to say anything new. It's the same story as any other story in history.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Like Avatar, blockbuster,
information,
there's a message
being
there,
portrayed.
But it's like really just Pocahontas. Yeah.
Right. It's the same story. It's not. Okay. It's just entertainment to make money.
Yeah.
Now, they can use the telling a message and telling a story to make money. I'm not saying you can't be very clever in your way of how you do it. Right. So if they do the marketing right, they could do that trans story in a way where it makes a lot of money even without a Halle Berry. Right. But are they going to likely pay that person the Halle Berry salary?
They're not.
They're not going to.
Yeah.
So what my point about, I don't care whether Halle Berry plays it or not, or whether it's a trans person or whether it isn't or it is, or any of that stuff, because it's totally looking past the point of what's the purpose of movies is primarily to make money.
Right.
So if I wanted to make movies and like really put a lot into it, I'm restricted and limited by the fact that I have to do it for a profit.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Because how do I get all the people to participate in making the movie? How do I get Halle Berry to do it?
Yeah. by paying
You know
them.
what I mean? How do I get the people who do the cameras and all that stuff and everything?
Yeah, you got to pay them.
And it's like, if everybody had money already and there was no survival pressure, why would anyone do any of that stuff unless they just wanted to be a part of it and they had a specific skill set and so forth?
So check this out. The point that you were reading about, as far as women make 70% of whatever the man makes, right? Thomas Sowell was making this argument back, I think in the 70s, he was making this argument of, well, actually, if you take out all of the women who are just in part-time, who, they haven't had the time to actually build up their reputation within the company. If you just measure it based on women who have been in the company for just as long as the men,
Exact same scenario.
Yeah, exact same variables, the women are actually making more than the men.
Right.
But it's like these companies that want to bring in, at least at that time, they were bringing in women maybe to be PC or whatever. It's like, hey, we can't actually pay you the same that we would pay them because you don't have the experience.
Right.
And so it looks like that's probably the same thing that's going to happen now today, as far as all these companies saying, we've got to change and hire more trans people or women or people of color, whatever it is. But then what's going to come out in a couple of years is you're not paying these people the same that you were paying the white guys or whoever was in power. And it's just going to be like, okay, well, common sense, we can't.
Like what the point is, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Because now you're making decisions about, like, we have a system that's based on productivity of money.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's questioning that.
Yeah.
And so if you're just making decisions about who runs the company and this and that based on these other points, it's not going to produce the money the same way.
Yeah.
And the companies know that.
Yeah.
I would say by and large, when you look at the information, the companies are not making decisions based on sex and race. They're making it based on the qualifications of the people and a lot of other factors that go into, is this person going to be profitable for our company?
Yeah.
So the problem I see with all of this debate, and that's why I wanted to show some of the philosophy. We didn't go into all of it. There's so much there. Right?
Yeah.
Just kind of like picking and choosing little pieces, right? But
yeah,
it shows, though, even if you just look at a little bit of it, the emphasis on the narrative, the story, the discussion about things, not what's actually physically, mechanically happening.
Yeah.
And so the problem is we're focusing on all of that. And it's like, okay, let's say we restructure society so that we have the perfect representation of the races and sexes and gender expressions and everything else that can possibly be considered is all represented in the most ideal way in terms of what people are feeling is important.
Yeah.
Is that going to fundamentally change the fact that we are placing money over the value of life, and that is what's causing a situation that's not best?
It's not even looking at that.
Like the reason why we feel inner conflict is because from a very young age we don't have what we need.
Yeah.
We're not given the time, the emotional attention, the vocabulary, the nutrition, everything that we need to develop in our unique individual physical body into the most optimal, fully functioning, best expression and capability.
Yeah.
But when that doesn't happen, we start to develop all this inner conflict. It's like, I'm limited. Doesn't feel good when you're limited.
Right.
And that compounds. And then there's symbolic reasons for why that's happening that are given to you, or that you just randomly put together. It was like in your environment, so you made the association yourself. Like, we're pattern recognizers.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we recognize the correct patterns. It just means
right.
we see patterns, even if they exist or not.
Right.
So because of that, we're getting all this inner conflict. But like I was showing you with that, like we were talking about the Judith Butler thing, it's opaque. You're not allowed to look at any of that.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to look at what's really going on and take responsibility within yourself.
Right.
So the only solution is, it's like it's like if you had a bunch of colors and they started mixing them, you're going to get all these extra colors. See what I mean? So there's going to be all these extra like expressions and like unique sort of nuanced differences between this expression and that expression and so forth. So if we want a society that's going to accommodate and account for all of that, we first have to be able to distinguish which of those are coming from the point of it's a self-chosen self-expression versus which is a reaction to or a response to or an attempt to deal with some inner conflict. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like an interesting example is like that Desmond is Amazing.
Oh yeah.
Where he said, like, where him and the mom have said, like, he started watching that RuPaul's Drag Race when he was like a little kid.
Right.
Right. So you can see how that's already going to influence the way he's thinking about expressing himself.
Yeah.
Was that coming from him?
No.
I mean, they openly said, like, yeah, when he was little, he started watching and then he started playing dress up. Yeah. And what's interesting is, think about this for a moment. Why was the mom watching it?
For entertainment? I don't know.
Okay. Some value she saw within it, like of entertainment or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But also, there was this whole sort of controversy where there was a video with him and that other guy who, had been charged with murdering some drug dealer. And like, but I was watching more information about him, and he's from this group called the Club Kids from New York.
Right.
Where they would have these parties and they would dress up, and they were kind of trying to go outside the bounds of like traditional expression.
Yeah.
So the mom apparently was really obsessed with that guy.
Yeah.
From the past, from her childhood.
Right.
Because imagine her growing up and seeing these characters and being like, wow, that's so cool. And then that would lead her into like valuing watching something like RuPaul's Drag Race, because it's kind of the same thing. These people are kind of pushing the bounds of like what's normal accepted expression and so forth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So she's placing value on that.
Yeah.
And then the kid is watching.
Right.
He's mimicking what he sees.
Yeah.
He starts acting it out. And she's like, yeah, I like it. Yeah, that's funny. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, keep doing it. Yes. Yeah. It's like my child is now embodying all these things that I never got to do. Like, I just had to watch it from the sidelines.
Wow. Yeah.
And now this child, after a certain age, he doesn't remember any of that really. Right. He doesn't remember all the little points. He doesn't see how it all influenced him. So now to him, because he doesn't have any tools of self-awareness and so forth, he is just like, well, it's who I am. So now if you're saying anything that's diminishing my expression, you're harming me, you're not including me and so forth. But the problem with it is you have on the one side, like the conservatives, where I think the people on the left think that the conservative people just hate gay people, lesbian, trans, all this stuff. They just think they hate it and they're afraid of it and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But, it's like investigate all things and keep what's best. Like I can see the problem, like again, all the problems on the left, I see it. Like I'm like, yeah, these are problems. But the solution that's presented is not a real solution. Like I want everybody in the world to feel complete and worthy and have high self-esteem and feel good and contribute and feel fulfilled and all those things.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like the solutions of the left are just stop that, like break that down. But it's not an actual like a solution of like, okay, well here's what would actually work or be best. It's just like, no, I don't like that. It is, like you said in the beginning, a reaction to what the structure or the right is presenting.
Well, here's where the real problem starts to come in. And we've seen this already, where what about when people who are pedophiles start saying, this is my expression of who I am and so forth.
Yeah.
Because what I would say, or someone who's using common sense would say is, look, you have within you some programs that are causing you to sexualize, or whatever the case is, children, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you need to deal with that.
Yeah.
But the theory, all of this is saying that's not, it's saying you can't say that. It's not a valid criticism. You can't,
right.
You can't, it's opaque. I mean,
it's just coming from within them.
You see?
Yeah.
Like, so and it's not even them, it's their self is fictional. Like, they're just the force of society. And it's like, so then how
Right.
can you ever, so what, you just allow them to start acting out?
That's, I mean, I don't
You
know
see, but
anybody.
can you see that that's where it's going? So where do you, because,
I, yeah.
people say, oh, you're just saying like gay people are pedophiles. No.
No.
But the theory of, so then, but the problem is on the conservative side, they make that argument. So then on the left, they go, they're
That's
thinking,
not right.
so what you're saying is we should outlaw being gay. You see how it's like this transfer of logic. And it's like,
Yeah.
no. Where it's like, is there a problem within being a pedophile and acting that out
Yes.
in society? Clearly.
Yes. Yes.
And is it clearly based on trauma, maybe even things they inherited DNA wise, et cetera, all these things?
Yeah.
Can it be corrected? We know it. We know you can change who you are.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
imagine you don't even have the tools of you can change who you are. You don't even
Right.
know that that's possible. And you've accepted that you shouldn't even question.
Yeah.
So the people on the right are kind of at a loss for words because it's like, they're like, we suddenly don't want this.
Yeah.
But we can see how the promotion of everybody should express themselves however and take down any sort of, like, think about this. What if trauma is internalized by children because the family structure is not stable and providing them the support they need? And that trauma, internalized trauma, becomes an expression that doesn't fit into society and causes problems. And then there's other ones that don't cause as explicit of a problem. Like being a gay person where you have two adults consenting is not the same thing as a pedophile.
No.
Like abusing a child. It's not the same thing.
No.
But the logic that's used to justify the gay point, if you apply that same logic, you can justify the other point. And so what happens also is, if I say there's a like, if I say, look, well, what if also being gay is, there's aspects of it where it's like instability within the family, because people are saying you're oppressing me, blah 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 blah, and we should destroy the family structure because it implies that you should have a man and a woman together to have a family, and that's harmful to the person who's gay who says, well, I'm not included in that picture. Right. So we need to have a picture of family that includes gay men, lesbian women, et cetera, et cetera. But what if for a child, it's actually best to have a man and a woman?
Yeah.
As a committed point, stable, effective, the best, not just have a man and a woman.
Right.
Just having a man and a woman can create a lot of dysfunction because they're not functional.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you're making there, because a lot of people, they just go, well, some men, are terrible. Or
no,
some
of
women
course.
Yeah.
So it's not just only a family with a man and a woman. Everything else is fine.
Right.
Like that's just one dimension of it.
Right.
But the point is, if you were to say, well, but logically, whatever, ethically, you can't say that because anybody can be in a family. It's like trying to destroy the idea or the common sense rather, that there can be things physically that are best and then there's less than that.
Yeah.
Because you could use that same logic to say, well, you can't say that a healthy developing child needs vitamin D. Because to make that argument, you have to say there's a physical thing that occurs where something physically happens. And I'm saying that a family is a physical thing.
Yeah.
That there's certain things that go on there that physically support and produce a child in an environment and so forth.
Right.
And so the problem is when you start going into, well, so on the left, it's like we have to get rid of the family because it's not including the other points. Right?
Yeah.
But then that instability in society will create all kinds of expressions like the pedophilia point or other things that are harmful.
Yeah.
And it's just one extreme example that everyone can, I would assume, agree generally that.
I think most people would agree, even though I am seeing like in certain circles, like that is being accepted now as like, no, it's okay. It's like, no, it's not okay. It's clearly not okay. But I think most rational people, I would like to
regardless of whether they do, we know it's not acceptable.
Yes.
So the point is, and we have another meeting to get to, so we'll just wrap it up. But
I know
the point is, when you see how like the left and right can't come to an agreement because the left is wanting the right to say there's no rules, but the right's like there are some rules.
Yeah.
But the problem is they don't even know why the rules are the rules. So they can't really explain it and articulate it properly because they're also holding on to other stuff that's not rule-based. It's not rule-based, but I mean, it's not common sense. Like going into like religion, that type of stuff. So everyone is still, whether you're on the left or right, still in this mental world where I need to be able to hold on to things that I can't show produce what's best.
Yeah.
You see that? So, and that's the problem. There is no, the right is right. It's not possible for the right to be right only or the left to be right only. There's elements of both that they're just expressions of the fact there's dysfunction in our society. That's why they exist. But neither one has a solution.
Yeah.
So we'll have to have another chat about it because like I want to get into like how all of this really fits together and what is the real solution that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I mean, because you can see, like you said that comment about Ilhan Omar. They just want to dismantle everything.
Right.
But the right just wants to keep it the way it is, even though it's busy falling apart in front of them. You see what I mean? So who's going to step up? Like we have to be the ones to step up and say, like, there's common sense here. We must create a society that includes everybody in the best way.
Yeah.
But that also has to include the point that you can change yourself.
Yeah.
So the person has to take responsibility and say, okay, these are the elements of myself that are not best. And therefore, instead of me trying to impose on other people to accept this, I can just change it. I can let it go. And there may be some elements that you realize, oh, these things are best. In which case, if the society's not including that, we should be able to change society and so forth, right?
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it at there. Thanks for the chat.
Cool.
I'll have to get out of here and get on to the next one.
See you in a minute.
On the next one.